Can you feel it? Can you hear the stirrings of the Spirit, the rush of the wind, the crackling of the flames, the bursting forth of the good news, given voice by Galileans? Can you imagine it? What would they know about spiritual matters? At whose feet did they study? Yet something is happening. How could they know to speak other languages? Greek? Well, sure, we all know some, enough to get by. But these other languages? Are they drunk? That new wine can be pretty powerful, and it's been very plentiful. That must be it. They're drunk. No, wait. I recognize those words. My mom's family was from Cyrene, and she sometimes spoke it. You're right. I've worked with an Egyptian, and I've heard him speak. I can't understand much, but that's Egyptian. Yes, and that man over there, he's speaking Latin. How can this be? By their appearance, these are common men, not educated scholars. By their accent, they're Galileans. It's impossible. But it's not. Let's get closer and listen. Last week, we left the disciples staring into the sky, searching to see Jesus as he ascended into heaven. It took 2 heavenly messengers to remind the disciples of their instructions, not to stare into the sky, although that's the way Jesus would someday return, but to wait for the coming of the Holy Spirit in Jerusalem. Jerusalem was crowded that Pentecost day. People had come from all over to celebrate the festival. It's called the Feast of Weeks, or the Feast of Booths in the Hebrew Scriptures. There were specific requirements as to the offering of 2 loaves of bread, and according to the law of Moses, every male in Israel was on that day required to appear before the Lord at the sanctuary. We would see it as a Thanksgiving Day, celebrating the harvest and giving thanks back to God in a Sabbath celebration. No work was to be done. And it was also one of the few offerings where the bread contains both salt and leaven. It was the spring harvest festival, the end of the barley harvest and nearly the end of the wheat harvest. The Jews were commanded to offer not only to God, but to others with a liberal spirit, especially to those who had nothing, the aliens in the land, widows, orphans. And into this time and place, the world receives the coming of the Holy Spirit. The harvest festival was being reversed. What could it mean? And if you weren't there, did you miss the chance to receive the Spirit? That could have been seen as an issue in the early church. The Spirit came, but what was it to mean to the believers once the rushing wind subsided? Corinthian church saw the various spiritual gifts as marks of approval. They began to rank them and to hold in greater honor some gifts, like the gift of speaking in tongues, versus others that they saw in lower positions, such as the interpretation of tongues. They were missing the whole idea of gifts. And so can we. What is a gift but something unearned and freely given? If there's a return expected, then it's not a gift. Oh, sometimes we forget that, don't we? When we give a gift, we often expect something in return. It was no different in Jesus' day. Remember how he told the wealthy to invite to their banquets those who could not give them anything in return, instead of those who could? And don't we sometimes value gifts the same way? How big it is, how useful it is, how beautiful it might be, and devalue, even inadvertently, ones that we don't like, not taking into account it's a gift. It was selected specifically for us. And to give thanks for it. Paul reminds the Corinthian church of the first gift that they received was the gift of faith, the ability to confess that Jesus is Lord. In that culture, that could have been seen as an act of treason. There was only one Lord. It was the emperor, not some Palestinian rabbi, much less a crucified Palestinian rabbi. It was the mark that they were called into unity. And it was only by the Spirit that they were able to confess it. The Spirit's gifts call us together. Our gifts are different. We saw some of them in our reading, but they're all needed, not as isolated things, but as building blocks. Do you remember how we're called to be living stones built on the foundation of Christ? None of us, not one of us, has all the gifts. We need each other, just as we need whichever gift has been given to us. All is according to God's plan. The diversity of gifts is necessary. Now, sometimes we downplay our gifts or pretend they don't exist. Sometimes that's because we've been told that our gifts are invaluable, that they're not as good as someone else's. Sounds sort of like what was happening in the Corinthian church, doesn't it? Sometimes it's because we honestly have never considered that we have a specific gift. Maybe it's because of humility, or because no one has ever affirmed that we have that gift. I can speak for myself. When I began to sense that I was being called into ministry, and I finally said yes to the Lord, I wondered how the Lord would use me. thing that I was absolutely, positively certain was that I would never be called as a pastor. Not because I was saying no to the Lord calling me to that, but because I didn't see it. I didn't see that I had been given a gift, that gift. What I did discover later was everyone else did see it. Listen closely, friends. We all have been given gifts. We are all important to the upbuilding of the body. We are all called into the community of believers to work together as Christ's church. Today is the birthday of the church. It is, in many ways, the birthday of our faith as well. But we cannot miss that the birthday was not our doing, but that of the Spirit. The Spirit continues to enliven all believers in new and exciting ways. We are, just as those early disciples, called to go out, to share, yes, even while maintaining the appropriate social distance. But we don't go unequipped, but we go with joy and power of the Holy Spirit, proclaiming that Jesus is Lord with conviction, but also with humility and gentleness. And we know, as Jesus told us, we will be filled with living water by that same Spirit. Not for our benefit, but for the benefit of the world. So are you ready to share the great news that Jesus is Lord?